Hey guys, welcome back to my next video. Today I'm going to talk about a subject I've talked fairly in depth about in the past, but now I'm going to use more relevant examples. Special thanks to Jason Everett for inspiring the first one. This is going to be talking about how we are made for greatness and how we are made for giving us what is best in our lives, not necessarily what we think is the best. So this was kind of inspired by a conversation I had with a friend of mine last night, where there was two friends of hers that were in an impure relationship. And to make a long story short, basically the girl was in an abusive situation, but because she's so desperate for love, she was willing to settle for a guy that didn't exactly sound desirable from what I heard. And so that immediately reminded me of a parable that Jason Everett mentioned in one of his talks. It's about how the Eskimos would hunt. You know, they take a knife and they kill like a lamb that a wolf would eat, and then they put its blood on the blade, and then they freeze it so that the blood is frozen onto the blade, and then they leave the blade out so that the wolf can go and lick the lamb's blood, because, you know, it's hungry. It wants something to eat. It's so desperate to find something that it settles for the blood on the knife, and so it starts licking. But then the problem is that because it's so cold outside, the wolf doesn't notice that his tongue is numb from the cold, and so the knife is cutting into the wolf's tongue, and eventually the wolf dies of blood loss without even knowing it. You could say that's basically the story of abusive relationships, because there are a lot of people out there that are so desperate for a relationship or to be loved and to be respected that they'll settle for doing something that does more harm than good. And to perhaps give you an even better example that's a little less graphic for those of you that are kind of squeamish, I apologize in advance if you're one of those people, is I heard yet another parable on one of the mission trips I went on, where a dad decided to make brownies for his kids, and the kids of course gorged into them, and he said, "You know what the secret ingredient to these brownies is, right?" And he said, "Dog poop." And then they immediately stopped eating the brownies. But they thought they were delicious earlier, but then as soon as they found out what the core ingredient was, they backed away. Now you could say an abusive relationship is like someone who is so hungry for love and affection that instead of thinking, oh, this is dog poop, this is like disgusting, I really shouldn't be eating this, I should be eating something healthy, something that'll actually improve my body rather than just be adding more garbage. They settle for the garbage because they're so desperate. But if we take the time to really invest into true love, that is the kind of love that lasts, and it's the kind of love that will bear fruit, as they say in the Gospels. Because, you know, the world has its pleasures, don't get me wrong. I mean, if you watch like my past 3 videos in a row, you know that I really like video games, but they're only going to bring me so much happiness before eventually I have to turn to what's called joy, which is something that only God alone can do. And, you know, God calls us to be in a personal relationship with Him, so perhaps your view of who God is very different than mine. But all in all, God proved to us what perfect love is. So if you're one of those people that's like, well, Paul, I know that I want to be in a relationship, but I don't quite know how to look for it. Who is the right guy or girl that is for me? And I'd simply say, well, hold on a sec. I'd simply say that is who you want in a relationship. Someone that is willing to give up everything for the sake of what is right. And because we as the church are compared to the bridegroom, our job, just like a woman's role in a human marriage, is to be open, to be receptive to having children, to raising them, and those children can do the ripple effect, and so on and so forth. In the same way, the church is considered like the womb of the mother. So, for instance, when we are coming up the aisle of church to receive Holy Communion, we're receiving Christ into us. Just like the woman receives the man's sperm, and the sperm combines with the egg, and that creates a new life. So with Jesus' grace, that brings new life within us. And that is the kind of love that we want to settle for. Not this artificial stuff that's going to kill us, but this stuff that it may not seem like it's taking much effect on you. I mean, if you're the type of person that thinks, oh, well, I'll just go to church and I'll receive the Eucharist and then I'll feel like I just ate a 4-course meal. Well, if you haven't made your first Holy Communion yet, I'm just going to break it to you right now. The host, which is what we call the body of Christ, it tastes like a cracker without salt. Like, it's pretty bland. And the blood of Christ is just simple wine, not really too much to be excited about. But we have to remember that grace is not necessarily about how we feel, but it's about how we are transformed. I mean, I'm pretty sure when you were confirmed, you might not have felt anything. If you went to reconciliation, there are some people that say they've lost like 100 pounds. There are some that say, yeah, well, I went in, I confessed my sins, not much happened. But grace is an ongoing process that helps us become more like God. It helps us become the perfect spouse of the Lord. And so the world often has the quick and easy solution. They say, well, why bother waiting when you can just use our methods and get immediate results? Well, if I can use an analogy from Star Wars really quickly to illustrate the flaw in that plan, if you've ever seen Star Wars Episode 5, The Empire Strikes Back, you know that Luke goes to the planet Dagobah to go and train with Yoda, to become a Jedi, just like his father. But then Luke gets all rash and says, you know, I've got to confront Darth Vader. But Yoda says, incomplete your training is. You must continue, you must, or something like that. But Luke thinks, well, I've totally got this. And Luke ends up getting his hand cut off, falls into a bottomless pit. He is totally not ready for the trial. He thought he had the quick and easy solution, but he should have just waited for Yoda to complete his training. You could say that's exactly what grace is, and that's why we Catholics put so much emphasis on the sacrament. You could say it's our ongoing training to become Jedi for Christ. And the lightsaber that we wield is the sword of truth that allows us to cut through the devil's lies and to live the best life possible. I mean, why do you think a lot of people compare Obi-Wan Kenobi to a Capuchin friar? Because he exemplifies a lot of those traits. You know, the obedience to his master, the celibate lifestyle, you know, trusting in the Force rather than raw human emotions. So in conclusion, I'd like to say that if you're one of those people that is so desperate for love that you'll just take the first charmer that comes to mind, a question you want to ask yourself is not necessarily, what can I get out of the relationship? But more like, how can we as a couple mutually support each other? Because a relationship is two-sided. There's always going to be like one person gives, the other person gives. You know, Jesus established a covenant with us. And if you know what a covenant is a binding contract between two parties. And both parties give, and then each party has that faithful, like, I'm going to hold to my end of the bargain until the end. In fact, marriage is a covenant because the husband and wife say, I will love you and support you and guide you till death do us part. It's an everlasting covenant. So instead of settling for stuff like one night stands or like, you know, gratification here and then the next day it's gone, settle for love that lasts. Settle for true holy matrimony. Settle for sacramental holy matrimony. And I guarantee you that it'll just be, you could say, the prelude to the epic marriage feast that God has prepared for us in heaven. So hope my video didn't go too long. Hope you learned something from this. And until then, keep the faith, stay epic, and remember that you are made for love and made for dignity. God bless you.